Well, welcome to Newsbreak. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi. You know, we are a broadcast studio that comes to you 3 times a week with this program, trying to bring you up to date on what's going on in our immediate community as well as the nation. But it's been so much going on in Jackson, Mississippi over the last 2 or 3 weeks until we primarily have been focusing on the issues surrounding our community. Now, you can join us on Facebook, on YouTube, on Roku TV, and on WeBelieveDigital.com, our very own platform. You can call us at 800-492-5186. On Facebook, hit the share button. Chat with us as well so that we'll know that you're there. On the website, go to the donate button and make a contribution in order that we might continue to build and bring you the quality of information and news that you deserve. You know, we're on 6 days a week. Actually, we're on 7 days a week because we have programs like the New Horizon Church International Sunday service that comes on Sunday mornings. And we look to expand our coverage in terms of our religious communities as we grow bigger and stronger and deploy more personnel into the region. So it's good to be here today. And as always, I have my co-host with me, Chris Young, a young man that migrated down to Mississippi. In many ways, like folk have of his persuasion have done over the years, have come down to Mississippi to help join the fight to improve the quality of life of those that have been suffering for so long. His passion for social justice is unmatched, and I marvel each day that I have the opportunity to sit with him and listen to him as he describes what he sees as the ills in the community and in the world. And it's a fresh new approach. You know, it's tremendously important to see things through others' eyes, to see what people see that have not grown up in the forest. It's hard to see the timber when you're in the forest. It's difficult to remember why you came into the swamp when you're up to your behind in alligators. You need a fresh set of ideas, and Chris Young has provided that for We Believe Digital, as well as the Mississippi Link newspaper. So Chris, it's an absolute pleasure having you here in the studio, and tell the audience a little bit about yourself again and what's going on around here.
Well, it's great to be with you today, Mr. Garrett. And you know, I was just thinking as you were embellishing me a little bit there, you know, it really is a long way from the White Mountains of New Hampshire to Jackson, Mississippi. It really is a long way. Now, that's where I grew up, in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, really about 2.5 hours north of Boston. You know, so that's where my growing up years were. But then I escaped and managed to not be invited back for a second year of college, and ran into a district court judge, and he suggested there were opportunities for a knucklehead like me in the armed forces, and I took him up on it and saved myself about 30 days in the county farm by doing that. Okay. And I had no idea I would have stayed in the Navy 20 years. I mean, I had no idea. And went in a college flunky, and left 20 years with a graduate degree, and visited 40 countries. Actually, a couple more, but when you're in the duty section and you're only there for a day or two, you can't always get off the ship. So, but on the ground in 40 different countries, how can that happen to a young little guy from the White Mountains of New Hampshire? But anyway, so. The formal working years just kind of came to an end about 18 months ago. by choice. I mean, I planned so that I could be ready to do that as early as possible and come here to Jackson. And I just know it was the right decision. Every day I get reminders that it was the right decision. And of course, meeting you, being introduced to you by a mutual friend of ours, and then you introducing me to Miss Jackie Hampton. I mean, this is how I do so well. I stick with the winners. I meet the people that are influential and on the ground, and so I just suit up and show up every day and try to learn and try and be helpful and try and use my voice, my but try to use my paleness to the fullest extent possible to contribute in a meaningful way down here in Mississippi. That's what I'm doing.
So, in White Mountains,
Yeah.
what was the racial composition of the area you grew up in?
You only need one guess. Yeah, I mean, we're 2.5 hours north of Boston, but I can remember 2 black children in my elementary school, none in my kindergarten, Catholic kindergarten, and only 2. Well, maybe 4 total people of color total, if you will, and then those numbers went up a tiny bit. I think in my high school graduating class, there was either 3 or 4, 2 or 3 actually, black people in my graduating class.
So somewhere along the line, you encountered something that set you out on this mission. Do you know what that was?
Sure. Yeah, and
Could
it was
you share with that? Could you share?
Well, I could. I could. I don't share it every day, but and it was at a very young age, and there were a lot of things that were going on in the home that I grew up in. It was a loving home, but that doesn't mean that there weren't things going on. But one summer, my folks, who were innkeepers and earned most of their annual income when the snow was on the ground in the winter months, volunteered to host a gentleman from Kenya. His name was John Wiriki. And I was 10 going on 11 years old. And we hosted John. I told you we live north of Boston. We would get to go into Boston, so it wasn't like I was a stranger to black people. But anyway, John, ate, slept, and breathed with us for, about 3.5 months over the course of the summer. And I love John. I mean, I loved him. He told us about his family. He told us about Kenya, and he shared all kinds of different things. And I just spent every minute I could spend with John, and I couldn't bear to say goodbye to him at that adolescent maturity level. I couldn't bear to say goodbye to him when it's time to leave. But I remember it was time for basketball, and my friends were getting new Converse. Remember the canvas?
Oh yeah.
Converse high tops.
Oh yeah, with the star on.
Oh
yeah.
And my ones from the previous year or the year before, I'm not sure, were in rough shape. But I would have wanted the new ones anyway. So because as soon as you see the friend has got it, you want. But my mother told me, we really can't do that because, the money hasn't come in due to the reservations for the winter months. The income wasn't there. And so they're making ends meet. And you remember, Mr. Garrett, what were they, $12.95, $13.95 a pair?
Yeah.
And they couldn't do it. I asked my father. He said, if your mother said we can't do it, she handles the checkbook. I'm sorry. You're going to have to make do with what you got, at least for the first couple of months. Then maybe we can. And anyway, so it was time for John to leave. And my mother was taking John to the airport in Boston. And remember, I told you I couldn't say goodbye to him. And anyway, they showed up at my elementary school. And I got called out of class and come down the hallway. And there's the principal standing there and my mother and John. And of course, John had a box under his arm. And, I just took off running. I grab a hold of him, like a starving child or something like that. I just, but the crazy thing happened, Mr. Garrett, was the recess bell rang. And all of a sudden, all the hallways are flooded with all these white, absolute 99.9% white children. And I took a lot of heat based upon their ignorance. I took a lot of heat and teasing and harassment and getting shoved around out on the playground because, they see me up there hugging this black man. But see, they didn't know what I knew. They just didn't, because they didn't have the experience. It wasn't that they're wrong or bad, but they just weren't educated, or they were ignorant because they hadn't had the same experience. So, but it taught me something deep inside at an early age. And then, of course, in the military, you're living in tight quarters. It just moved on from there. So that's the story.
Thank you. We're getting ready to go to a station break. These stories are tremendously important to see what shapes us, makes us be who we are. There are experiences that we all have, that we've been encountered along the way, that sets us on a path one way or the other. Some good, some bad. We just heard from Chris Young, a remarkable young man, and he talked and shared with us things that he very seldom tells. And I hope that those of you out there will be encouraged to share your stories with us as well. We're going to station break. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Let's read and learn together. Meet Mason. Written by Sherry Tate. Illustrated by David. Mason is a young, inspired learner. Walk with him as he uses his 5 senses to explore the world around him. Your young one can learn to identify shapes, numbers, letters, and more with Meet Mason. Available now on Amazon.com.
Welcome back to News Break. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in an African-American-owned broadcast studio. That's right. We're in Jackson, Mississippi. We're in the poorest state in the nation, but we have one of a very few African-American-owned broadcast studios that's reaching out with information and participating in the narrative all over the world. You see us on YouTube TV, on Facebook, on Roku, and our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. Join the conversation by calling us at 800-492-5186. You can go to our website and watch the archives of all of the stories and all of the programs and shows that we have produced over the last 3 years or so. While you're there, hit the donate button. Of course, we need you to support this broadcast studio as we grow and as we bring you the kinds of information that you won't find anywhere else. If you're watching us on Facebook, hit the share button. And many of you are sending stars to a lot of our programs today, and we appreciate that. It's very much needed. We ask you to continue to share our programs with your friends all around the world as we grow. On Roku TV, our apps is right there between Showtime and Netflix. That's right. We Believe Digital. You can go there and you can watch all of our programs as they are archived there as well. Now, we're bringing you news about Jackson, Mississippi. Many of you out there are wondering what's going on in Jackson. What has happened to Jackson? Why is this going on in Jackson, Mississippi? So let's get right into it, Chris. Jackson has been experiencing a water issue. Can you tell our viewers what's been going on?
Sure. Well, after decades and decades of neglect of infrastructure maintenance, upgrades, et cetera, it finally caught up with us. It's caught up with us a number of times over the years. And last year during the ice storm, literally the month before I moved down here in February of 2021, a lot of the city was without water for the better part of a month. And then Band-Aids were put in place, et cetera, and then at the end of last month, with the amount of rain, the volume of rain that we had, it started to rise up in the Ross Barnett, soon to be renamed, I think, reservoir, and they had to discharge more water than typical into the Pearl River. And then the Pearl River ended up cresting in flood stage, but not nearly as high as was predicted. But the damage was done because you have all this, call it natural water, rainwater that comes in and it gets into the river and the sediment and all this stuff. And so the plant trying to process all that just became overwhelmed. Not only the volume, but the quality of the water it was receiving was, it needed a lot of treatment, and it overwhelmed the plant. And so, and that was a week ago this past Monday when the Pearl River crested, and the plant had already failed, I think, a couple days before that. So we've been hurting. And, we went without a consistent water pressure for days upon days upon days. The quality of the water is absolutely inconsistent across the city, going to require enormous amounts of testing. But the good news is today there is ample water pressure. The system's running at the desired pressure level, 87 psi now, for a good long while. Improvements are being made. The state stepped in, and as soon as the state stepped in, they automatically asked the federal government to declare an emergency, and the federal government is now behind us. And so while everybody plays the blame game about this, improvements are being made. We've got extra technical expertise on hand at the water plant. Today, the health department gave provisional Class A operator licenses to 2 operators at the plant. So we're now up to 4. I think ideally they say we need to have a dozen or 15, but I think it's possible we were really down to 2 Class A operators there for a while. So all kinds of things are starting to change. So that's how I'd begin to answer you.
Well, tell us a little bit about the dueling press conferences. Everybody wants to know what is the relationship between the city of Jackson, the state of Mississippi, and the federal government. I've heard reports that Congressman Thompson, who is the congressman for Mississippi in the 2nd Congressional District, who most people in the country know, he chairs the committee that's investigating the January 6th scaling of the wall by Trump supporters. And so, he's known all over the world. But he also had some comments regarding the lack of a plan in Jackson, Mississippi. And so I know our mayor is saying that he has been asking for help, and he's gone back and pulled volumes and volumes of data that shows where he was asking for assistance. I believe last year he indicated he asked for $47 million, and I think he got $3 million for the state.
And he wasn't the first one to ask either. His predecessor, Mayor Tony Yarber, had put forth a plan, and now you're going back to 2015, 2016 timeframe.
Yeah, yeah. And so we don't have a cohesive community where everybody is saying, let's all pull the wagon forward without pointing fingers and blame backwards.
Yeah.
And so that's unfortunate, but, we are making some progress. But were there any press conferences today?
Yes, there were. And a lot of things going on today. The EPA administrator himself, Michael Regan, is here in Jackson today. Him and Congressman Thompson were actually visiting with residents in homes today. I don't know where Queens Road Avenue, does that ring a bell for you?
Oh yeah. It's in the heart of Jackson, South Jackson.
Okay, so and they were down there sitting on people's couches in people's living rooms down there today, just listening. And one of the really important things that came out of that, Mr. Garrett, the EPA administrator emphasized the importance. He asked the question, how long has it been since you have had confidence that you can turn on that tap and have clean, quality, with the correct amount of volume water when you want it? So of course you're paying a water bill. How long has that been? And he did not appear to appreciate the answers, that he was getting. And he really emphasized the importance of regaining trust in the water system. Now, for people in Jackson, that's going to be an uphill climb.
Well, it's interesting because trust is an operative word. We have to gain trust or regain trust in the leadership of our municipality, of our county, of board of supervisors. We have to also gain trust, I won't say regain trust, of our state government and of our federal government. Now, so the word trust is a good word, and I don't think there's a lot of it here from the citizens to the leadership, etc. How do we overcome that, Chris?
Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, I wish I had a magic wand, and I wish people could just see one another as people, and it doesn't seem to happen. Would this be happening in Los Angeles? Would this be happening in Boston? Would this be happening in Oklahoma City or in Dallas? No, it wouldn't. But it happens in places like Detroit, Flint, Jackson, Mississippi. Why is that?
Well, to me, those places that you named, St. Louis, Missouri, Memphis, Tennessee, those places have tremendous African-American populations and leadership. And some of the leadership is first generation, and in the plight of things, you have to get your feet on the ground and understand what's going on in your city. Years of neglect. But Chris, no one decided that we're just going to neglect the infrastructure. It didn't have the resources necessary to repair and maintain a system that was designed for 250, 300,000 people plus, during the tremendous migration of talent and money out of the city of Jackson.
Tax base.
So Jackson lost its tax base.
They're not having this trouble in Tupelo. They're not having this trouble in Oxford. They're not having this trouble in Meridian.
And Chris, we see this disparity throughout Mississippi and urban cities.
In urban cities.
We see this often. And what we have to understand is that when you get most of your revenue from your property taxes and your residents leave and your businesses leave your community, you are going to be in difficult times.
Right.
being able to maintain and prevent. It's not that we don't have the capacity to lead, is you don't have the resources necessary, then you're going to find yourself falling on hard time.
And the economics, if you're sitting in a governor's chair and you declare in your, what do they call the inaugural, State of the Union or whatever, State of the State address or whatever, that you claim to govern for all Mississippians, and you live in a mansion in Jackson, Mississippi, I mean, all you got to do is draw the drapes and see what's going on all around you. And if you're not saying, hey, wait a minute, where's the black businesses at? This is an 83% black city. I'm not seeing any. I can only see white businesses as far as I look outside my mansion window. Where are the black businesses? What's wrong with that? Call so and so and let's have a meeting, and because you care about everyone, everyone's equal, everyone's a bona fide citizen here, but stuff like that doesn't happen in Mississippi. It's almost well, I know a prominent black female businesswoman down on Fair Street, and she says it's punishment that they punish this black city by neglect and by not caring as much about the black economics or the economics for black people, however you want to say that. They award minimal scraps, crumbs of contracts to black contractors and black businessmen, both in the state of Mississippi, statewide, and also in the city. How can you do that? How can you have a black mayor, a black city government, black city council, and only be awarding, 4% of your contracts for goods and services for this city to black business people? How do you do that?
It's a tremendous problem.
Yeah.
And it is totally unfair. And the root cause of that goes all the way back to the days in Mississippi where we had plantations, right, and we had slavery, and we had everybody trying to oppress the African American community in order to gain economic wealth for themselves. And the same thing applies here today. Mm-hmm. We do not want to share the economics in the African American community.
And definitely not with black people.
And definitely not with black people.
I mean, this is one of the states that seceded from the Union.
Right.
It didn't.
It just doesn't want to do that.
Right.
And so we find that Mississippi, which remains last in the poorest state in the nation, and that's something that keeps it last.
Yes, the mentality.
The mentality, the attitude keeps it last.
Yeah.
The Bible said in the story of the shepherd, when he had 100 sheep, if he lost one, he will leave the 99 and go looking for the one. Mm-hmm. Because it was that important to him.
Everybody mattered.
Everybody mattered to him.
Right.
And until we get that kind of visionary leadership, both black and white leadership, to understand that concept, then we're going to continue to fight one another and oppress one another and keep ourselves down.
Yeah.
Because you cannot keep a man in the ditch unless you get in there with him.
That's right. That's right.
And
so you're running around with a heart full of hatred. And what kind of person are you being? I mean, what kind of life are you having? Right. If you got all that in your heart.
All in your heart. All you can do is beat down and hold down and keep everybody last. Yeah. Reminds me of a dog on a haystack. He just won't let anything. The cows can't eat. Nobody can eat. He just sits there on the haystack. Well, listen, we reminisce. We bring you good news, and we tell you what's going on in Jackson, Mississippi. And I'll be remiss if I don't say that not only are we having a tremendous crisis with water in Jackson, Mississippi, but we're having a greater crisis with effective communicable leadership, that until our state government starts to really appreciate and talk to African American leaders in our city and our county that Mississippi cannot and will not grow. And until African American leaders understand that it is their responsibility to provide opportunity to their constituency, like Martin Luther King and Medgar Evers gave their life for them to do, we cannot grow. So when Rich's Disposal Company, an African American firm who is the low bidder on a garbage contract, who has now demonstrated over 5 months that they're more than capable of picking up the garbage in Jackson, and yet an African American, predominantly black city council will not approve the contract and will not pay the African American vendor. So those of you out there in the world, if you have any influence, if you have any relatives in Mississippi, do like Chris Young. Come help. Send encouraging words. Run commercials. Help our evangelist community, our pastors, convene the meeting with all of our elected officials. And let me send a shout out to Working Together Jackson with Perry over there, that have done an excellent job bringing the religious community to the side of the elected officials, and our pastors that were standing there on the courthouse steps of City Hall are catching tremendous heat now from the opposition, saying that it's all about corruption, it's all about African Americans trying to take all of the grip for themselves. And yet, as Chris pointed out, we're living in a community that gets less than 2% of contracts for goods and services in an 85% African American city. And yet, our European brothers and sisters are afraid that if they change that in some way it would diminish their quality of life, as opposed to rising tide should float all boats. This has been Socrates Garrett and Chris Young. We enjoyed having you with us. Again, we're broadcasting live on Facebook, Roku TV, on YouTube, and on WeBelieveDigital.com. Go to Facebook and share. Send stars to support our program. Go to our website. Hit the donate button. We need the resources to continue this work. It's tremendously important. It's been a great deal of enjoyment for me to visit with you and Chris here today, and I look forward to seeing you. Chris, I believe we're back
2 p.m. on Friday.
At 2 p.m. on Friday. So until then, stay safe out there and drink all of the good water in Jackson, Mississippi. Good night.
The Mississippi Link is an African-American female-owned newspaper with a trusted voice that is highly respected throughout the city, state, and nation. Our motto, keepers of the knowledge for people who speak the truth, since 1993. Link significantly influences the thoughts, attitudes, and buying decisions of its readers. Call us at 601-368-8481 for your advertising needs. If you would like to receive a newspaper in the mail each week, our annual subscription is only $52 per year. That is only $1 per week for you to stay informed regarding many stories that you can only get in the Mississippi Link. Sign up today at themississippi.link.com and click on Home Delivery.